Hello, Sparkly Beans. If you're new here, my name is Avery, and I help folks who are passionate about liberation and justice to discover themselves and their roles in an emerging future. And today, what we're doing is a little January wrap-up. I don't know if folks like these. I used to do them, but I realized that one of the benefits of them is actually for myself, because I have a pretty poor memory, and so it's nice to be able to look back and be like, oh, what happened that month? But also, I just wanted to get a chance to kind of show you some quick things like decks before I'm really ready to do a full review, decks I've received but maybe haven't started working with yet, talk about books I've read, maybe stuff I'm listening to or watching, and then just like a little bit about the month. So if that sounds fun, grab yourself a drink, have a seat, stick around, or, wander around and wash your dishes, whatever you do while you YouTube, I don't know. So yeah, January, it has been an interesting month. I started the month in a really good place. I had a really transformative December, especially internally, like lots of shifts, just in mindset, in like attitude towards my work, but also just my life. And it was funny, I was looking at the astrology for the first quarter, which if you're not an astrology person, I don't want to scare you, but it's a rough first quarter in a lot of ways. It does improve, but and I was thinking like, okay, so I know probably like it's not going to be this like sparkly and awesome all first quarter, but one can hope. And one of the things I've started doing actually this month for the first time, or this full like moon cycle for the first time, is starting to track my experience of moon phases. So this is like a note of just like real acceptance, and like wherever you're at, I think it can sometimes feel like, especially like once you start studying astrology, or even if you're not an astrology person, if you're just interested in like the moon or other kinds of like rituals, or maybe it's like wheel of the year, I think sometimes it can be like, oh my god, like I didn't do a ritual for this, or I didn't like focus on this, or like other people are talking about like all these transits and I'm barely keeping up. And I know I felt that way for a while, and it took me maybe 3-4 years to like really get to the point where I'm even just like fully acknowledging like most, I mean, I would say every, but like pretty much every new and full moon. Like, so that was the starting point. Like, I think it's okay to have like a really basic starting point for what you focus on. The moon is a common place to start, but particularly for me, because I am a Cancer moon, and that's my chart ruler. I'm very lunar, and so like understanding the phases of the moon is kind of a way of understanding my own cycles, and decoupling from sort of clock time, calendar time, linear time, all of which is made up. And so like working with the moon is a way for me of sort of like touching back into natural cycles, but also like not expecting that. So like I do honor like the new moon as a kind of as a starting point, as like a blank slate. I don't necessarily set intentions like right at the new moon. We'll do the dark moon, but which is like right before the new moon. But yeah, the new moon being like its sort of purest, invisible, like it's invisible to us, and in some ways like the most itself. And then the full moon I would honor as like a kind of harvesting time, and a shifting from the building up to the letting go. But even so, I think it's useful to tune into your own personal cycles, and not to like be like, oh shoot, like the book says, that this is, or the internet says like this is what the moon does. And to get to know like how your body responds. And so I had done new and full moon like kind of practices, generally with tarot mostly, and I just recently was like, I'm really like getting a lot of curiosity about my own like full cycles and like what they look like energetically, sleep wise. I have a sweetie who told me that so I mentioned how I never sleep on the full moon. Like I always have trouble sleeping, and I didn't notice the cycle until I got into all of this, and it's like, oh, it's always the full moon. That's when I have the insomnia, because I don't have insomnia regularly, but I frequently will at the full moon. And she was like, oh, that's so funny, because like I get insomnia at the new moon. Like is that weird? Is there something wrong with, like, I have it backwards? I sleep a lot at the full moon, I have insomnia at the new moon. And I was like, I mean, I don't know. One, I mean, like, I haven't done any sort of poll. But it's so personal, right? And like, you could look at the charts, and I mean, I gave her the one, I was like, well, one possible explanation, if you look at our charts, actually our moon phase at birth was like the opposite of each other. Or not opposite, but like mine, I have a waxing, she has a waning. So it's like, I mean, that would be one simple, but like, I'm sure if you polled 10 people, you wouldn't have consistent results there necessarily. That it's so like your body, And so anyway, I had this curiosity about how my body goes through the full cycle, and so I've been tracking that, and that's been interesting. Just noticing like where there's like where I'm really like in flow and where I'm irritable. But then also like, yeah, I don't know. There's other factors are sometimes hard to track, but that's something that I've been doing, and just noticing that like, yeah, I started out the month like really, in this like very like flow place, and things have been rougher in the past couple weeks. I've actually heard for a lot of people. So Mercury was also retrograde, and then so was Venus. I've heard from a lot of people that the past couple weeks were tough. So if you're experiencing like a lot of irritation, anxiety, frustration, just stuff coming up, like know that that's all. I take a deep breath together. Know that I'm here and I'm holding space for you, and like same bro. Same. I've been actually, I should have mentioned this off the top in case folks stop watching by now, but so I guess like announcement, I'm gonna mention this on the video I'm posting tomorrow as well, or someday, Friday of this week, but I am really excited about an offering that is free that I'm doing in the middle of the month. So I want to like tell folks about that. You may have seen it pop up on your feed as a live, but I would really, really, really encourage you. I'll put a link in the description to actually sign up, because it is called Heart-Centered Swords. It is a combination of a free webinar, which we'll host on YouTube Live, but also a week-long email series. So if you don't sign up, you won't get the email series. And I would love to see y'all. I would really love to see y'all at the live. That would be so cool to have some of my current subscribers there. And what it's going to be is, I basically have been like dreaming this up for like probably more than a year. I've been thinking about, I had all these like various blog posts, and it was going to be like a series, and then I was like, wait a minute, like let's do this differently. So I've been thinking about the sword suit in the tarot, and just really over time how my impressions of it have evolved, and especially as somebody who came to the tarot as like a really mental person. So if you're somebody who like also like kind of showed up and were like, I'm logic brain, I'm this and that, like I'm attracted to the tarot because it's a system and it's a structure, and like, there's all this kind of woo-woo spirituality, and I'm like trying to figure out where I fit in. Even for me, it was like I was open to that, but I didn't feel like an intuitive person necessarily. And then like, I really identified with the swords. When I was first described to me, I was like, this is the suit of the brain. I was like, great, brain, that's me. Look at the swords and go, oh my God, like especially the minors. The court cards less, but like the minors, you're like, wow, like that's a hard ass journey for the mental people. And over time, I've come to kind of like deconstruct that and not just think of like swords equals mind. And so we're gonna be talking about that, and about like how different modes and modalities like cut across and integrate through the suits, and how it's a little reductive to just say like this is brain, this is heart, and kind of how to like watch out for that a little bit when you're learning, but also going beyond just that point. Like, yeah, we're going to talk about elements, we're going to talk about the swords themselves, we're going to go through a kind of reinterpretation how I've come to see the swords, really putting like heart at the center of the suit, and like how that comes forward. We're gonna talk about lovers, our year card as an anchor in the majors, as well as justice, which is my year card, which has been showing up a lot for me this month. Like when you're getting really curious about justice themes, like truth and what is truth, and what is our relationship to truth, and how to like what is humans' responsibility there. And then broader, so that's going to be like a lot of what we talk about in the webinar. And then the email series, we're going to actually like look at it's going to week-long email series, and we're going to go through each day and look at some different themes around things like that come up in the swords. So the webinar kind of introduce you to the way I'm thinking of the swords, and then we'll use swords cards as anchors throughout. So you don't have to be a tarot person. Like this whole webinar is going to be very directed at anybody who is interested in sort of like how do brain and spirit and heart, like how do all these things work together, and it's gonna have a real kind of like radical bent. So radical, I mean, I don't know, I never know what words to use to kind of signal this, but like a real sort of bent towards looking at an emerging future that is different from what we're in right now, one that prioritizes justice and liberation, which is entirely what I'm about. And so in the email series, we're going to explore themes like, what does it look like to like unlearn stories and narratives that aren't serving us? How does the swords kind of anchor us into that? What does it look like to access creativity and like to show up and share our story, even that maybe that's kind of scary, or like it's hard to figure out like where we fit, right? What does it look like when our stories and our understandings and our mental, like frameworks are interacting with each other, and how do we love each other in unique ways and build community, and set healthy boundaries, and then how do we dream in and vision and write stories of a future together as we're building it. So I really hope this will speak to the kind of disconnection a lot of us are feeling right now, and the sense of like, need for like belonging and community, and also sort of like wanting to do what's right, but also what's right seems to always be a shifting target. And so how does the tarot speak to that, and how does the sword speak to that? But also just more broadly, like how do we engage with it as humans? And so every day you're going to get a bunch of like reflection prompts and exercises, tarot spreads, all sorts of things to kind of help you work through that. So I'm describing all this to say I would love for you to sign up. The webinar is on the 11th of February. It's a Friday, 4 p.m. Eastern, or 4 p.m. Pacific, sorry, my time, 7 p.m. Eastern, UK, that would be midnight, UK, sorry, UK, and Europe even later. So yeah, I did kind of admittedly prioritize North American time zones, but maybe next time I do something like this, I'll be a little more inclusive of our friends that were in Europe. But there will of course be a recording, but if you can make it live, there's going to be plenty of time for discussion and conversation. So please come and sign up whether you're available on the 11th or not. You'll get the recording, get the email series. So that is all to say that I described this both to tell you about it, but also because that has been a lot of my January. I realized like I spent I was like so purposeful in planning this out in December and being like, okay, here's what I'm gonna do this, here's what I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna seed all the content I'm gonna do. So I've done a couple of different like being on different people's channels and podcasts as we're leading up to this, because I wanted to let more people know about it, but also just to have opportunities to be in community, because that has been a big focus. I think it is going to be a big focus of my 2022, is like I'm moving out of a place where I always felt very like scared to partner or to be in community, and have been shifting around that a lot, as I've talked about in other videos that came out recently. But really like looking for ways and finding that the universe is totally giving me ways, totally dropping opportunities in my lap, now that I'm more open to them, to be there for people, to like in my life, like just opportunities to kind of like, thinking like, oh man, I really have like a lot of space in my heart to like help people emotionally process. And then like people showed up for that, and that was great, without my saying it to anyone. And so yeah, so I reached out to some folks about partnering. So some of the stuff I was doing in January as well was like recording. You may have heard already. If not, check out. I did a conversation with Anna over at Blind Love Radio, which is a podcast. You can find on all the platforms. Blind Love Radio. So if you look for my episode there, I think it's still the most recent. We had a great conversation. Oh my god, amazing conversation. Actually on the full moon in Cancer, which was or not on it, but sorry, day after. This is a very non-linear and rambling video. I'm gonna put timestamps in, so hopefully you're just not watching this if you don't care about it, but if you're just here for the reviews and such. But if you're here for the update, I'm gonna keep going. So yeah, the full moon in Cancer was so like I was doing all this, like beginning of the month. When was the full moon? It was pretty early, right? So I was like, really, like a lot of stuff was coming, channeling and like ideas, and then I was also like writing all this social media content because I wanted to be ready to, like, I want to give myself plenty of space to prepare for Heart-Centered Swords. And then I had this conversation with Anna the day after the full moon. So the full moon was like, like so much just, yeah, like I had a therapy appointment, and then right after I was like psychic channeling for 2 hours that I thought were 30 minutes, right? It was one of those. And I'm not going to actually like talk too much about that here because that conversation with Anna, I actually go into a lot of it, but I had a lot of like light bulbs about the magical, like I always think ADHD and my other neurodivergencies are a superpower, but even more so, like some stuff clicked for me about the magic of, and like the ways, particularly my ADHD, but my neurodivergencies in general, like have gifted me with certain things in the spiritual realm. So if you are, neurodivergent, especially ADHD, and into the spiritual stuff, definitely check that out, because I have some ways of thinking about it that I think might be interesting or comforting. And then like I was channeling a ton about like polarities and integrating polarities, so like signs on opposite sides of the chart, particularly like the Pisces Virgo and the Cancer Capricorn. And then we talked a lot about elements, earth and water and air and water. I don't know. There's astrology. There's all sorts of things. But it was very like, I was like, oh, I'm on, because it was so close to the full moon. I just felt like I was just channeling throughout that conversation. So it was really special, and I would encourage if you listen to podcasts to go check out the Blind Love Radio episode. Oh, there's the ding. See, the ding is telling you. I'm just gonna like accept the ding and tell you that the ding is telling you to check that out. I keep meaning to turn on Do Not Disturb, but if you've noticed that ding, it's because ADHD, actually, I have a little singing bowl sound that goes off every hour, because I realize, this is a pro tip actually, if you have ADHD, get yourself an app that tells you when the hour is passed, because it will help if you're hyper focusing. It's like a cue that goes, okay, it's the top of the hour. Do I still want to be doing what I'm doing right now? Have I had a drink of water? No. The answer is no. Am I hungry? Do I need to pee? Etc. So, recommend. But yeah, that full moon was actually, for me, it made a grand water trine in my chart between the full moon, which is very close to my moon. It wasn't quite conjunct, but it was like not that far off of my moon. Grand water trine between my Mercury and my Saturn. So there was this real sense of like communication, intuitive communication, but like in a structure there with that podcast. And I also did some other collabs. I think probably actually, if I drop this when I expect to, actually today, probably, but if not very soon, I'll link to the video below, or to the channel if it's not out yet. I did a reading for my friend Chimdi on Chimdi's channel, and that was really fun, doing like a reading for somebody who hasn't really had a tarot reading before, or maybe she's had one, but Chimney's channel is really fun, and it's all about like spiritual journeys and being a creator and like just all sorts of stuff, and she's got an amazing personality, so you'll really enjoy that channel. But I did a reading over there, and there is actually a giveaway associated with that. So if you are watching this fairly soon, or fairly nowish, the giveaway will run until what did we say, the 10th, I believe, at midnight Eastern. Check the video to make sure I got that right. But for folks in the U.S., it's only U.S. I'm sorry, it's just COVID shipping. I'm too nervous to try to like ship something internationally. But I will be giving away a copy of the deck I used in that reading. So particularly, I think BIPOC readers, this is awesome. But anybody who wants it, this is the Melanade stand tarot. So it's all black and brown folks photographed, and it's a really cool deck, and I just haven't been using it as much as I could be, so I decided, in the spirit of giving, that after that reading I'll just go ahead and give this away if somebody wants it. So to enter that giveaway, check out the video, and you can find out in the description how to enter. And then I also had a great conversation with my friend Laura, Aquamarine 18. I bet a lot of folks here know Laura. And we got all nerdy about the elements and like all sorts of things, like the way meaning is constructed and the way language sort of affects us and our practice and our like evolving sense of the elements over time and like various stuff. So if you don't know Laura, big philosophy nerd, tarot, spirituality, etc. But I think the two of us are really have a lot of like thinking about philosophy and meaning and language. So that kind of thing appeals to you, then that's also a collab to check out that'll be dropping soon on Laura's channel. And so yeah, once that's out, I'll put a link in the description of, well, I can go back and actually edit this one, but I'll put a link in the description of whichever video comes out after that one. So lots of opportunities to see me in various places, and that was really fun, and I hope to keep doing that. And if anybody has a platform of some kind, and whether it's YouTube or podcast or just like a newsletter, like wants to chat or on IG Live, I'm looking for more opportunities to kind of like partner with people. And so, obviously I can chat about lots of things, but tarot, astrology, particularly from like a neurodivergent perspective, from a disabled perspective, from a queer perspective, talking about like healing and justice, a combination, or healing and action, what it means to have like oppressed and oppressor identities, and working through that, all sorts of stuff. So yeah, if you're curious and want to chat, you can leave a comment and or just honestly head to my website. There's contact details there, queermagical.com. I guess that's also a thing that was maybe December, but I finally actually bothered to make my website a website. So you can check out queermagical.com. It's not a very big website, but it's got some information about me and what I do. And I will be actually adding some one-on-one offerings very soon. So I'll tell you when that's up, but that'll be on there once I get it on there. Yeah. So yeah, January just it was like a lot of prepping, and then I got to a point of doing all that after the moon and like just in the waning cycle, where I was just really feeling like a combination of like the waning moon and Mercury, and then I hadn't written all the emails for the series yet, which is fine, it's gonna happen. I'm not worried about it, but like I tried to pre-plan so much, and I think the universe has really been dropping into my lap the exact things that I'm working on and I've intended to work on that like I know are present for me. It's like every single one of them is coming up. Everything from like opportunities to really like practice what I preach in terms of like working through conflict or like differing, I don't know even what the word is, but like the difficulty of communication online. What does it really look like to build real relationships? I've been like thrilled to get back in touch with one of my best friends, who we've been out of touch for a while, and talking about collaborating, which is really exciting. You know, things around just like emotional regulation, all sorts of things. It's like every time I have a thing I'm working on, spirit is like, all right, motherfucker, here you go. And it's interesting because it's been hard. Like the past few weeks have been hard. I think, you know, yeah, like just during this period, it was like, this is not a period to really like create. And so, or not that astrology is deterministic, but like I could feel it was not a period to create. I would sit down and just feel like, how do I do? But the change I've noticed in myself, and like I think the like hopeful thing, if you're, you know, if you're new to any of this, or like you're struggling to develop a spiritual practice, is that I think as your mindset shifts, you get to the point where nothing ever becomes easy. Don't expect that. Nothing ever becomes easy, but the way you experience things when you're kind of in a wheel of fortune sense, in the center of the wheel, when you're like more steady, and you know that it's going to keep turning, and you can just kind of like, there's a certain part of you that just kind of observes and is like, oh yeah, no, this is shitty. I can feel it's shitty. And also I get less drawn into it. I don't feel as much like, oh my God, this is the end of the world. You know, I was really frustrated that I couldn't write the really meaningful stuff I wanted to write. And I wanted to prioritize that first. I wanted to write the content for the email series before I did any other like random little social media I hadn't finished, right? But my mind was like, no, my mind is really scattered and wants to do little things. It doesn't want to do big, meaningful things. It doesn't have the like creative energy, and it's tired from all the social media I've like pre-done. So I just had to listen to that, right? And let it be, and like trust that the moon keeps going, my cycles keep going. So yes, that was kind of like a long ramble on cycles in a way, but so yeah, like I've been experiencing a lot of anxiety, but able to kind of place it and like work with my brain, and acknowledge and not try to stop it, like just allow it to like move through. And oh yeah, and the new moon just happened in Aquarius yesterday, or day before, and I just was like, meh. Like I barely did anything. I just didn't feel, it was just too much. Like I feel this real resistance, so I didn't like pull my normal cards. Britton LaRue mentioned on her Insta that she's doing her new moon stuff on Friday when the moon, I think, goes into Aries, and Mercury is direct as well. Mercury is direct as this is coming out. So yeah, I think I'm gonna do that too. So other things, yeah. So a lot of this, like, I'm doing all this writing is I'm still in the process of transitioning over my social media kind of sustainability that I've mentioned in earlier videos. You know, allowing and do like a little less planning of like, here's what social is going to be about, and a little more allowing, trying to balance the need to plan and the need to allow. Like I said, I'm working on getting some one-on-one offerings back. I'm really excited to be doing one-on-one live offerings, not just written and recorded, so you can like sit with me and do a session. So I'll have more on that coming soon. I sent my first email out to my list, my sort of new rebooted list the other day. So if you're not signed up, then check that link in the description. Because my long form content is, you know, shifting to just be here on YouTube and then in the email. So you got video, you got written. And I think I will be posting some of that, like selected pieces on my website, just because I hear that's the thing to do. I was like, I had this weird resistance around blogging because I did it for so long, and I was like in on the blogging very early and did pretty decently, like never like a huge blog, but I had like a decent following. And then like shifted to social, and now there's been this blog resurgence, and I'm like, well, I gave up all my followers. Like I gave up all my like traction in blogging, and you know, So I'm not quite having a blog, but selected pieces will appear on my website, but not all of it, and not in the full like detail. And there'll be like in the emails there'll be things like more reflection prompts and like opportunities to engage, and those won't show up on the website. So I would and the website will be like probably pretty delayed from the newsletter. So I would strongly encourage you to sign up. Please join me. I really loved this. Not to do my own harm, but I really loved writing this one that I put out on the first, which was all about coming home to storytelling and the way that I fall in love with things, people, places through stories. And so I talked about like attraction models and like intimacy models and the way like we're attracted to things and how stories play into that and how like we resonate with other humans through stories, and got pretty vulnerable too in like sharing some of my own like history of making things up when I was younger, and how I've come to like have self-forgiveness around that in the context of thinking about stories and visioning and dreaming and what is true and what is not true, and how does that all fit into movements we're trying to build. So it was really like I loved writing it. So I would love for you to sign up for the newsletter. If you're particularly like, oh my god, I want that piece, like sign up for the newsletter and then just like drop me an email or something, I'll forward it to you. But yeah, I'm gonna be dropping one next week where we're talking about Aquarius, and so I have like multiple lists so you can decide what you want to be on. So that first one is in a list called Field Notes. That's more that kind of like general spiritual, talking about my journey, talking about your journey, and then one of the. So you can, when you sign up, you're on all the lists, and you can leave lists if you want less frequent email. If you're on all the lists, you get an email about once a week. So next week, for my what is it called, slinging cards and reading stars, which is the more tarot and astrology focused email. Next week we're going to be talking about Aquarius, and I love Aquarius season. Like I love the weirdness of Aquarius, the revolutionary potential of Aquarius. And we're going to be talking about Aquarius, and there's going to be a lot in there about disability and like creative dreaming, and then Afrofuturism is going to be a huge topic of that as well. And just the ways in which I've been inspired by Afrofuturism and how that kind of plays in, and like what we can learn, what non-Black folks, particularly, I mean, I think white folks are missing, right? And not in a, to be really clear, it's not saying like, oh, and go do what Afrofuturists are doing. Like, it's not an extractive thing, right? But seeing the ways in which Black writers, and in particularly like women, femmes, queers, engage with the future and with visioning, I think we can learn a lot and think about that dreaming and visioning in our own cultures, in other cultures, non-Black folks. And then, part of this too is I want to acknowledge that this is coming out during Black Futures Month. It's also Black History Month. I think we should acknowledge both, but I love Black Futures Month as well, because I think it's really important to not only acknowledge the ways in which Black folks have been integral to history, American history throughout, U.S. American history throughout, but also just Black history in general, and all the contributions and innovations and amazing things that Black folks have done throughout history, many of which unsung, many of which forgotten, many of which exploited and erased, and et cetera, right? Violent histories. But also to look to Black Futures Month, acknowledge February as Black Futures Month, I think is a call to not just look at history, and not just look at people who have maybe passed or whose contribution happened in the past, but to look at the visioning and the dreaming and the Afrofuturism and the ways in which it's not just about, we often say like, oh, Black people are so resilience. And like resilience is of course a huge part of the Black story, but we have to acknowledge, right, the reasons for that resilience, and the oppressive circumstance, and then look to, it's not just about what have you survived, but it's about how Black people are thriving and dreaming and envisioning and inventing and imagining a different world, and creating, not just imagining, but like the beauty of without like wanting to fetishize it, but just the beauty of like creating in the now, from the place you are, having the boldness to think that something is possible, And I think, even when you're in really dire circumstances, to say, no, like, how do I seed this now? How do I start this now? How do I, through storytelling, is so important for everyone, right? And so I think Afrofuturism is one way to engage with that, but just like Black Futures Month is not just about Afrofuturism, it's about all the ways in which it's important to prioritize Black folks and center Black folks and their visions in our future, and to make space and allow and reduce harm and reduce oppression, to allow those futures to emerge. So big celebration to everyone for Black Futures Month, and definitely check out some like Afrofuturist writers if you're not dialed into that. There's so many, and I'm gonna recommend a couple from my personal, but I'm not saying these are the best. These are just like some of the folks I'm really into. So I love N.K. Jemisin. Of course, Octavia Butler is like foundational. If you don't know any Afrofuturism, like start with Octavia. The Parables series, especially right now, will really resonate. But I love I personally, if you're queer, if you're non-binary, I might actually just say start with the Xenogenesis. What do they call it? Lilith's Brood. Sorry, the titles have changed because it's 3 books and then it's condensed into one. But if you look up Lilith's Brood or Xenogenesis, you'll find the trilogy. I mean, it's a little out there, like it gets sexy. So if you don't like sexy, but it's really cool on gender. But yeah, Parables of the Sower, Kindred, there are various content warnings, and like, be ready for some heavy stuff and to really like be present with it. And then what actually probably my favorite Octavia Butler is not a common favorite, but I really like vampires, and I always wanted vampires to be like not just this like, oh, it's this like same like white guy, whatever, like kind of not so consensual story with a white lady. Fledgling. It may be activating to some people. Like, there are definitely some content warnings on it, but Fledgling is actually probably my favorite. Or is it Xenogenesis? I don't know. It's hard to pick out a favorite Octavia. N.K. Jemisin. I never know who like specifically fits into like Afrofuturism, but I would assume Nayla Hopkinson does, and Nayla Hopkinson is also like, there's a lot of like magical realism in there. Those are the ones that come to mind, but there are many. And another great starting point is the anthology, Visionary. Is it just called Visionary Fiction? No, it has a different name. Oh, it's Octavia's Brood. Octavia's Brood is an anthology of what's called Visionary Fiction, which I will leave you to read the introduction to learn what that is. But it was edited by Adrienne Marie Brown and is it Lolita? I want to make sure I pronounce the name correctly. Because this person's work is amazing and I don't want to get their name wrong. Amazon. Lolita Imarisha. I was going to say Imarisha, yeah. Lolita Imarisha. And apologies if I'm not pronouncing that correctly, but Lolita Imarisha and Adrienne Marie Brown co-edited it. It is so good. So yeah, like this is a great month. Check out some Afrofuturism if you've been meaning to and you haven't. Oh my gosh. I had all these topics to talk about and it's some amount of time. It's 35 minutes, so if you're still here, hey. Oh, hey, I touched on a lot of things, just like automatically. Actually, I'll say one thing I will say is, oh my gosh, is that it's funny. I've just displayed this. I've been thinking a lot about feelings of too muchness and allowing myself to be this kind of rambly long form, allowing myself to lean into like Mercury and Pisces and the way that my Mercury is a very flowy. Mercury and Pisces is like, I had a really good example experience the other day actually where I was like bemoaning that I couldn't write for these upcoming emails. And my Mercury is like, oh yeah, no, I have all the ideas. Like, I have so many, like, I've got it. Like, I know exactly what I want to transmit to people. And I was like, great. What do you want to transmit? And it's like, blar. I'm like, excuse me. No, blar. Like, I don't have words. I've got it all. My Mercury's like, can I psychically transmit this to everyone's brain? I'm like, you kind of have to write an email though. Yeah. That's my Mercury, folks. So I'm trying to like allow myself to not always like be edited and be structured and be perfect, and like all of that perfectionism is part of unlearning racist capitalism and white culture. As distinct from, to be clear, when I talk about this kind of stuff, like white culture, meaning like whiteness is a constructed thing, very real because it's been practiced for so long, but like whiteness as opposed to just like my skin is white and I'm European ancestry, and but there's a lot of I've noticed a lot of calls from non-white people that are like, it's not like white people also need to divest from whiteness, and to do that you have to understand that whiteness isn't the identity you need to save or preserve, that you do get to have a culture and an identity. And what that looks like, we may have to make it up, right? Because like, a lot of us, like myself, my ancestry, generally my ancestors on all four kind of grandparent branches, have been here for hundreds of years, and of course arrived in very violent and ways, as settlers, as colonists, as, violent people, as people who participated in enslavement of other humans, all of which is horrific and I want to fully acknowledge. But yeah, because of that, like, there's not a strong tie for me anyway to like specific European. There's some information, but the information is limited in terms of like which culture do I come from, like Northern Europe. But I think there's space for us to like create culture and ritual that is not stealing or like exploiting other cultures. Some of it may have to be new. Some of it maybe is repurposed or reclaimed or found from our ancestors. Sometimes we may feel an intuitive call to certain traditions. One of the like challenges I've had is that in general you don't, I am suspicious of like any sort of intuitive feel, like I think I'm Irish kind of thing, because I feel like that. I don't know. I worry about that. Like, oh, am I just going to end up appropriating European cultures that I don't know if I'm actually part of? And at the same time, I think there's body wisdom, and like if you don't know your ancestry, like going to places and like where you feel intuitive calls, I think could be valid. And actually, a lot of what I'm trying to do in my work is explore like how we can break down and move away from this kind of like rightness and trying to like, is everything right? Did I get it right? Like, how do I, because there's no way to get it right. Like, we may never know. Like, and a lot of it is like getting comfortable with uncertainty. I think like the whiteness wants us to be like, okay, we need to prove your ancestry 100%. You need to, like, or else you're a terrible, bad, appropriative person. And while I definitely like appropriation is a problem and stealing is a problem, there's also that uncertainty piece of I come from somewhere, I maybe don't know, and there's a lot of practices that are totally outside of the like whiteness of connecting with deep ancestors, connecting with generations that you, even if you don't know where they come from, and asking your ancestor, like, what can I do? What kind of rituals? What kind of practices might I do? And you might not get anything, but like doing that kind of like, might be meditative work, it might be visualization, it might be psychic, it might be just like in your body, feeling what feels right. But finding ways to like bring ritual and culture back into our lives and relationship back into our lives is a big part of my work. I think is really essential for white people to move away from whiteness and the constructed racist capitalism kind of whiteness that is like, you gotta be productive, you gotta be perfectionist, all these things. That was a topic I didn't expect. But how did I get here? Too muchness. I was talking about too muchness and rambliness, and I have no idea how that connected, but it's okay. We're gonna move on. But yeah, giving myself permission. Oh, right, because I think I was talking about like the whiteness of narrowing and having to be kind of quote unquote perfect is really something I want to move away from, and so I'm rambling like this at you, and just allowing that. And one of the things I've learned in business, and if you're really interested in business stuff, by the way, I'll just note that the founders tier is still available. If you're getting value from these rambles or from anything else I'm doing, you can totally support my work. If you have the capacity, if you feel called, I really am. This model is very much about like making things accessible and free, and then allowing people to be called to support. Because I can use your support. This is my full-time job. One of the ways you can do that, I'm doing a special where generally my tiers are just support. But if you support $20 and up, I wanted to acknowledge that with just a little special. I don't want any of my like general content not be free, but I will do a quarterly kind of report. It's almost like a funders report, where I'll tell you about my business and talk through some of the business stuff and tell you how things are going. And so like in this video, I'm not going to go into too much, I don't think. Maybe not at all. Like what's coming up with my bigger offering that I'm coming up with. A lot of the themes I'm talking about are like coming into a group offering. It's gonna be a really cool container, and I'll share about that process and like what it's like to build that, and what it's like to like have an intuitive business, and like but also like try to plan and have strategy, and what does that look like. That'll all come out in the Q1 video. And it's normally 20 and up, but I'm running this founders tier special because I really want to encourage people to support early and to acknowledge if you get in on the ground floor. And so until my birthday, through the end of the day on March 2nd, so about a month, you have left to sign up for $10 a month. And as long as you could stay on that $10 a month level, you're going to get that extra. So you get that quarterly video, and then there's also some little like perks where you can get in a little early, get some discounts on things, get some like early access to things. Like I'm going to have an advice column in my newsletter. You can get first dibs on asking anonymous questions. You get like chances to, if I'm doing like educational videos and I want to feature a chart or feature somebody in like a tarot reading, I'll let you have first dibs on that and basically get a free reading with, in an educational form. So yeah, if you're into that, check out the founders tier. So yeah, I won't talk like too much about that, but how did I keep like going, we're going on tangents here, we're branching, we're not like coming back to the tree, but that's okay. So yeah, right, just like that I'm, really like, one of the things I'll talk more about in that quarterly video is that I'm really trusting in the universe, and trusting that there are people that like this kind of thing lights them up, and maybe reflects, like if you feel like too much, if you're a neurodivergent person who like rambles and you, or info dumps, I do that. If you info dump folks on like the autistic spectrum, and get something out of seeing that reflected back, like you don't have to be bloop. You don't have to do that to yourself. Not required. And it's like a little scary and vulnerable because it feels a little like unmasking, but and I know it's not for everyone. Like I know even for me, right? Like I tend to like shorter things, but I'm really trusting that like the people who need to receive my style are the people to work with, and the people that whether that work with means show up here and take advantage of what I'm offering out there for free, or whether that means supporting through Patreon, or whether that means like working one-on-one or in a group offering once I have that ready to go, whether that means showing up to Heart-Centered Swords, any way that you want to engage. Like I believe that the people who really need me are going to show up, and that the universe will help us find each other. So, but we can't find each other if I'm making myself something different. And I've never been a big person to hide, but I think you just notice more and more layers. One of those layers is allowing myself to be unstructured and share. I had a really interesting realization, which was that I talk about Lindsay Mack a lot on here, and Lindsay's a tarot teacher and my primary teacher, and I can't believe I didn't notice this, but like I'd been having these feelings for a long time, and I'm having them a lot right now of like, oh my god, I'm just too much, I just talk too much, I just do too much, like people, edit yourself. And I realized, I was like, what? Lindsay didn't edit herself? Like I never really thought about it, but I'm like her courses, and there's so much value, like check them out. But that's sort of how I am, right? If you like sign up for something with me, you're gonna get a lot. Like even this free offering I'm doing, like there's no cost to Heart-Centered Swords. It's like you're gonna get some serious like content you can work with, throughout the year if you want to. In the email series, the webinar is probably gonna be a couple hours, and it's just like a lot of value that I'm offering. but she's the same way, where it's like you sign up and, you know, it's not for everyone. Some people are going to want like a digestible, like short, rules based, right, tarot. That is not Lindsay. So if you need rules, don't go to Lindsay. But if you want like really magical, spiritual, like if you like connecting into somebody who really like channels and brings down things from spirit and like really makes you feel like held and warm, like she'll talk for 90 minutes. And it won't always have a structure, but I feel so healed by it. And I know other people who've like done her stuff who are like, oh, there's a lot. So it's just like finding the people. I mean, that's me. That's I've been really like leaning into this title of change doula, and I think I'm gonna start like putting that on more stuff. Like I find myself to be like a doula for change. Like somebody who is a doula is like a very supportive energy. It's holding you. It's like seeing you, like you, for who you are and holding space and like create like sometimes we just need somebody to like make a container and say like, I got you, you know? And that's me, and that's the energy that I believe I can bring and change, because I think I can bring that energy to people's personal transformations, but always really grounded in like the change we're in and the world change. And you know, my dear friend like said to me, she was like, you know, when you're feeling all these like feelings and you're like, I don't, like, why am I just like I recognize them, but also why they're here. She was like, you know, you're processing like a lot through your body collectively. And that was something I hadn't really thought about, is like the ways in which like I feel really equipped to hold space and center others and care for others. I think it's like my Cancer moon. That's how I should advertise myself. If you want a Cancer moon and like a Pisces sun and Mercury, if you want somebody who is like gonna both like dual, like that's that Piscean, like tolerance for change, like adaptability, fluidity, uncertainty, liminality, like being with you and all of that. But then you want that Cancer moon to like hold and create the container, like, hey. But yeah, I realized like I process a lot that isn't named, and I think if you're somebody who does this, like, it's not always specific. I've been noticing the universe is really resonating with so many of the themes I'm thinking about. Like polarities is one, like thinking about polarities and integrating, and non-binariness and integrating sort of things that seem like opposites is a huge thing that I have been thinking about, and then now it's suddenly like coming up everywhere. Thinking about relationality and what a real resonant relationship looks like, and how we introduce that into our lives in a pandemic. And how like justice movements need to change. I've noticed that a lot. Like I didn't expect the degree to which my like social justice and nonprofit background would come up in my work, but I'm now really drawn to like working with folks who are grappling with things like, what's the most ethical career? Is nonprofit even better than corporate? I don't know. Like how do I balance like my work and my choices, and you know, do I work for like, is my labor separate from my activism, or are they the same? What does it mean to be exploited in a nonprofit context? Like all these things, I'm like, oh, I can like totally provide like emotional and spiritual and support for that. And I think, but I'm realizing like it's actually moving through my body. So even as I feel this like resonance, I'm also like, I think I'm processing a lot of collective stuff physically. And so if that's you, you know, just like giving yourself space for that is really important, and knowing that you're not always going to know what it is. It's not always specific. Okay. Oh, before I get into decks, books, etc., I will also just say, I'm not going to talk about it at length, but my former organization, some stuff happened that I have feelings about. But specifically, the thing that is, I can publicly share, that has been publicly shared, is a lot of folks have gotten laid off, and I have a lot of friends and like really amazing former colleagues, like that I can like personally, seriously recommend for various things. They're all coming from a nonprofit. I was on a tech team, so a lot of the folks I know have tech and data and marketing, et cetera, skills. But also I know like some policy people, some other folks like organizing people. So, you know, if you're hiring, if you have ideas, if you have, you know, things that you'd like to share, if you're like, oh, I'm looking for a person that does this, like let me know, and I might be able to make connections. You can find me on LinkedIn for that too, and I can make it more direct connection. So just if you look up Avery Fawcett, spelled the way it is in my channel, I'm probably the only one. So you'll see me on there. So yeah, if you have any job leads, let me know. Okay, cool. Well, now we're at a timestamp. So if you missed all that rambling, we're to the structured portion of the program, and let's go ahead and start by talking about decks for this month. So what did I work with? What did I receive this month in terms of tarot and oracle? So I got a couple decks in the mail. One is the Healers of the Earth Oracle, which I've been looking at for probably 3 years. This is, and I want to say it had borders before, so I'm maybe not. I don't know. One deck I got recently, I was really happy that it's borderless now. So this is the Healers of the Earth by Mandy Peterson. Yeah, Mandy Peterson. I can't see whether this is focusing, so I hope it is. So these are just some really interesting keywords, like the clock is ticking, and then this kind of digital manip art, which I'm not always into, but this is like a fairly simple version of it, not too like crowded. And I just found the key phrases really interesting, so I've been meaning to get this. It's got a real healing vibe, without a care. It's like a tree. So that's exciting. I haven't worked with these that arrived, by the way, so I'm like showing it to you, but I have nothing to say about it yet. And then really excited, little full, new moon present that arrived on the last day of the month. I haven't even undone the wrap, but this is the Hollow Valley Tarot. So this is by Erin Elise and Davis Carr, who I'm so excited that David, I don't know if Davis watches YouTube, but hi Davis if you do. I am so excited about this because Davis and I did Lindsay's Tarot for the Wild Soul together. I think we actually did the Court Cards course together too. So we started, I want to say Davis was also early. I may be wrong. Maybe Davis had been into tarot longer than me, but we started out with Lindsay anyway together, and we were in a small group together, and with Nancy, Cardo Nancy over on Instagram. Great small group, and Davis has started a business like me since then, and does Meridian Tarot is Davis's handle and like website. Does a great combo of astro and tarot. So we do sort of similar things, but I am more than happy to share people who do similar things. I think more is always better. And one of the projects that Davis recently collaborated on is that pretty sure it's she, wrote the guidebook and collaborated on creating the Hollow Valley Tarot with Erin Elise, who did the Hollow Valley deck of symbols, which I also have. So that's the Oracle, and it is a cool sort of sketch, black and white style, and the two I think will go really well together, and I was just so excited to support Davis, so I'm glad that's arrived. Decks I've worked with, so I haven't been doing a lot of just like full-on spreads this month. Like I said, I've been kind of scattered all over the place. I have been trying to start a practice though. One of the things that with all these freaking decks, right, that I've struggled with is decks that I need to study and like setting aside time and like, but then when I just study a deck, when I like read the guidebook and take notes, it doesn't stick. I need to use it. So what I've decided to start doing, one of the things I decided to start doing was a daily-ish ADHD. Always give yourself a lot of flexibility. Be like, this is my intention for daily, and then don't worry about it. It's not going to be daily. But one of the things I've been doing is pulling one card each from two decks that I think go really well together. One is the Outsider Tarot, boop, and the other is, I don't have the box in my hand, but the Next World, boop. So Next World was one of the very first decks I got. Christy wrote as a friend of a friend, and I have all of Christy's books. Grabbed them all with the friend, who is Christy's friend, at FlameCon, Queer Comic Con in New York, several years ago. Basically just like, my friend walked me up to Christy's table and was like, this is Christy, buy all of her stuff. And I was like, okay, great. Bought all her stuff. I do miss that like ability when I had a full-time, like, or not my business kind of job that was very established, of being able to be like, sure, I'll just buy all your stuff. And then this came out and I was like, absolutely, Christy's got a tarot. I'm in. So everybody probably knows the Next World. Amazing, like revolutionary deck. But when I first got it, I was so intimidated because I was like, these are amazing people, and I felt almost like weird as like a white queer. I was like, all these amazing cutie poc, queer and trans people of color, and I was like, I have a crush on this deck, and it feels like I have a crush on this deck that I want to date, but I'm like, I don't want to assume the deck wants to date me. We had some conversations about it, and the deck was kind of like, why the fuck are you so in your head? Which makes sense, right? But I haven't used it a ton. I think partly because the cards are so big and they're so detailed and they're so beautiful that the reading in spreads with this almost, I don't want to say does it a service, but like, I don't know. It was just like I could pull one card, and I don't normally pull one tarot card. But you get so much because you also get like the astrological at the bottom and the and like interesting keywords. So I was like, oh, I haven't been reading enough with this. I need to read with this. So I pulled this out. So every day I'll pull a card from this. I will read the guidebook entry to just familiarize myself a little more with the specific card, because I want to get to the point where each of these cards I like know the person, because they're portrait cards and I feel like they have character. Similarly, the Outsider Tarot. So I got this, and it's by Bobby Abate, and I got this and started to use it for the Politics of Tarot challenge, which, if you don't know, pronunciation, I think it's Elena Davenport, Politics of Tarot on Instagram, did a challenge about politics and tarot, which I ended up not staying with, but it was a great challenge, and I decided to use this deck and immediately realized, oh, like, I can't just start reading with this deck. I mean, you can, but it is very specific. So it is phenomenal. If you like this kind of revolutionary, radical energy, get the Outsider. I'm going to do a review soon, but get the Outsider Tarot. I think it's still available. But it's one of these I would be like, don't sleep on it, because if it goes away, everybody will be very sad. So these are the backs. I guess I should do it up close. The Outsider Tarot really speaks to like the rebel, the freak, the weirdo, the outsider. It's like heart in my heart. Honestly, like, I always say the Slow Hauler is like one of a kind. Like there's never a deck that's going to be as soul for me, even though I don't actually own it. It will come. As a Slow Hauler, but I don't know. I think they may be tied, right? Like, this is the first time I've had a Slow Hauler level reaction like this. And there's decks I love, right? There's decks I'm obsessed with, but like my soul. So the way this is structured is that the let's find a not major, is that the suits are different, but also each card. So you'll just see the card like Six of Roses, and it's got astrology, but then in the guidebook, each of these cards is associated with a specific outsider. So you'll have these personalities. You'll get a quote. For most of the minors, there's an outsider. So it'll be like, an example was Four of Eyes is the underground journalist. So it'll be like Four of Eyes, underground journalist, and then there'll be a quote from somebody that this character, this idea was inspired by, or sometimes a couple people, but like below the full image in the book, there'll be this quote that really like pulls you in and inspires you. Then it talks about the figure. It talks about the image, which I really like in a guidebook, right? Y'all who know, like, it's annoying when you have like this really unique deck and then it doesn't describe the image. So it'll talk about the image and what's represented here. And there's a lot of symbology. And it'll generally be like connected to the way you understand that card in the Smith Rider way, but it's often like a particular take, a particular part, a different way of. So I found it connected really well once I read the entry, but I needed to read it and I needed to get to know these outsiders as themselves. And then like majors are also renamed. And then the court cards have their own thing. But so these are like some of the majors. So what I've been doing is just pulling one of these, reading the whole thing through, letting it sit, reading the next world, and then they usually communicate to each other. And it's kind of a reading for the day, but it's also just the question I keep asking is like, what outsider am I invited to meet today? And then what card would like to come in for the next world with it? So this deck I cannot recommend enough. Also the court cards, so they give you a little cheat sheet. Court cards are also renamed, so you have the sparks, the billows, the fathoms, and the roots. So it's a very non-gendered deck. And you'll see some like familiar faces in here as well. It's just, yeah, it's really good. So I've been working with that. And just, if I only pull 2 cards in a day, if I miss a whole day, it's fine, it doesn't matter. And then Last thing I'll show is Pacific Northwest. So I think a lot of people have been talking about this recently. I'm going to do a review. I have a practice with this. I was going to share it, and then I kind of got a call to be like, this is maybe a little more private. And so I'm not going to go into detail with it, but I have been using this deck to communicate with the land, the specific land that I live on, with the earth as a whole, but like being on this land and using this deck, I don't have words. I just don't have words. But it's not like I can do that as a review or a recommendation, right? Because like that's my personal relationship with the land and the deck. But so obsessed, so good. This deck. The guidebook is fantastic. It varies. Like some of the cards are from the perspective of the creature that's in it, because a lot of these are animals. That's in the card. Others are kind of more third person, but it's got this storytelling. But they're short, but they're these stories that you can just immediately connect to. Similar to The Outsider, actually. Both these decks, it's like when you work with the guidebook, you're like, oh, I feel like I'm meeting this card, and I love that. So I'll show you a few of the images. They're I love the art, and I also love the way these connect. So when you read these in a spread, I see different things each time, right? I see different connections across the cards, whether it's through color, through specific things in the cards. It might be like there's a tiny flower in one and a big flower in the other, whatever it is. I just, it's like the conversations with this deck are out of this world. But I also just feel like I can't transmit to you like how amazing it is. And I also don't know that everyone will have this experience because it is very personal. But if you're looking for a deck to work with the land, especially if you live in the Pacific Northwest, or if you're just looking for something kind of like, it's got a gentle feel to it, but some of the guidebook one, like at first I would read them and go like, oh, that's like, I don't like that interpretation of X card, like being so like, whether it's negative or whatever. But when I kind of like let that go and allow myself to just like feel all the angles of it, I found that the interpretations open back up again, even though, I cannot explain it. I'm sorry, but get it. Assuming it's still available. I'm not actually sure, but I think it is. So those are decks. One more. A little bit, I've also been when I do pull cards randomly. Oh, and I want to show you the Lenormand, but when I do pull cards, I finally got this. So Cosmic Cycles, I backed this. It came out about a year and a half ago. I backed this, and it came to my old address, and just because of various things going on with my former roommates, and oh god, poor former roommates, they've had a lot of shit. But finally got this. They sent it across the country to me, and this is the Cosmic Cycles Tarot. So it's very modern. Generally diverse representation, although I haven't like gone through it card by card to check for things. Because I often like a deck will feel diverse to me because of like queerness, gender, and race, and then I'll notice like everyone's skinny. So I'm not sure. I haven't actually like checked that, but it's very modern, very colorful. Some of the cards, like I keep pulling this Queen of Pentacles, and it's like it's just so like I'm so used to Queen of Pentacles being really earthy and naturey, and you're like, but if you're looking for a modern deck, so far I'm enjoying this, but I've only worked with it a little. Okay, and then finally I'll show you the Lenormand I've been working with. I always go back and forth because I want to say Lenormand, but let's be honest, nobody says that, so Lenormand. This is the Seventh Sphere. If you know Labyrinthos, the site that is really useful education, like infographics and stuff about tarot, Lenormand. But one of their Lenormand decks is the Seventh Sphere. So it's this. There's a Seventh Sphere tarot. I think there's a Marseille, and I have a Marseille. God, I'm doing it. See, this is my problem. I'm like, am I thinking in English or am I thinking in French? But the Marseille and there's a Rider-Waite, the Smith Rider-Waite that I don't have, but this is a Lenormand. So it's just got this like really pastel-y, like muted. And it's funny because with Lenormand, you're not really supposed to read the same way you do a tarot. You're not supposed to be like, I noticed the visuals and the similarities, and like I noticed things that are happening across I'm actually pulling cards from a spread that is on my table to interpret. But because of this color palette and because of certain things, I find myself doing that. I'm like, you know what? If my intuition wants to do it, it's fine. I don't care what the rules of Lenormand are. But there was one where it was like a ribbon going across from one card, and then there was a card that didn't have anything like that, and then there was another line, so it felt like it was like broken by the middle, and I'm like, I'm gonna interpret that because I feel like it. So yeah, those are the decks that I've been working with. So yeah, I like the Seven Sphere. It's pretty straightforward. It uses anima and animus as the people card, the significator cards. So they're kind of, I like that actually approach as one option for dealing with the whole. If you don't know Lenormand, it's got a man card and a woman card, and traditionally it's like, oh, whichever gender you are, and the other one would be like a partner. But the way I use those cards typically is I like when I charge the deck, when I think about like, okay, this is going to be the card for this, I tend to think of myself as the child card, and then I will think of like the man woman cards as somebody who might in some way embody those energies. So if I get like woman might be a woman, it might be a femme, it might be a non-binary person who feels more like that card than the other. It's like awkward. I mostly do that because I'm non-binary, so the child is me, and I want to keep one significator for me. And some decks do other things with it, but I like the anima animus because I think it kind of recognizes that thing I do without calling it woman. Like, it's a little easier to be like, oh, this is a femme. So yeah. Or even like pronouns. I don't know. There are various ways in which I will associate with Lenormand. Okay, so that's decks. Like some general haul stuff I'll quickly mention. Things I got in the mail this month include I have a Yeti. Well, no, I did not get this in the mail. Actually, I got this a year ago. I opened unboxing. So Chondi and I were kind of laughing about this when I did her collab, because I was like, oh yeah, I have a mic. I just have to take it out of the box. And then I confessed that I had gotten it as a gift a year ago. An awesome gift from my relatives that I was really excited to receive. And it was when I was playing piano a lot. And I was like, yeah, because I wanted like a mic that would record like my singing and not be like messed up. And then I could like directly pull the piano into and just have like better musical recordings. And then I moved in, my job ended and I moved, and I just really haven't been doing music that much at all. So I have this thing sitting in a box. And I'm not using it right now for this because I actually see, I have auditory processing disorder. I really can't hear quality. I can't tell the difference. And so, but I've been told that it seems either the same or even worse than my phone. So I'm like, oh, that's annoying. So maybe it's more for music, but I got a Yeti mic. So if anybody has mic recommendations of what I do with this thing, let me know. I got a tripod. So you are now not balancing against a thing of books. I finally got a replacement for my little desk tripod. And I got pants. So one of the things that happened in January is that we realized that in this lovely 1905 house was originally built for oil heat, so the ducts are too small. But there's a gas furnace, the ducts are too small. So it was like 19 degrees, and it was really cold in here. It was like 59 in the basement. So I got a space heater. That's a haul. But I also was like, okay, we need pants. Because I had all these thin pants, because my other apartment, my roommate liked to keep it really warm. So I went on an Amazon journey and ordered so many flannel PJs, a lot of which are not great, some of which are good. I've got to I realize, I'm trying to reduce my Amazon, because I don't like Amazon as a company. But yeah, there's a lot of research and figuring out what is a store, whereby although I should just acknowledge that frankly I'm not prioritizing it, so no excuses, just I haven't been able to I haven't prioritized. I gotta stop saying things like I haven't been able to. I mean, I could have, right, but I didn't. So I got Amazon PJs, and most of them aren't that great. So there's things I bought that aren't in a category, and then things I'm watching or listening to. This season of The Bachelor is not cool. Some of you may know, I don't know if I mentioned on YouTube, I had never watched reality shows. I think I watched the first season of Survivor. Actually, I think I watched the first season of The Bachelor too with my mother. But after I left home, I didn't have TV I haven't had TV for a very long time. I only got Hulu because of Spotify or whatever. And about a year ago, one of my coworkers, you know who you are, not that you're watching this, but if you are, you know who you are, mentioned, I think it was Love is Blind, and was like so into it that I was like, sure, I'll check it out. I fell down a rabbit hole of dating shows, which is very weird, right? Because like I don't subscribe to any of those norms. They tend to be very like mononormative, heteronormative, all the normatives. But I was like weirdly obsessed. It was like, no offense to any heterosexuals out there, I apologize in advance, but it was like watching in Discovery, like the heterosexual mating in the wild. I should say the heteronormative mating in the wild because it's really normative. And it was just like, this is fascinating. People think like this. So it's like I'm literally just like, oh. And as somebody who talks sometimes about like relationships and like relationship like and sex like advice, I was like, maybe it's good for me to know what people believe these days. I mean, not that the TV is a great example of that. But I just fell down a rabbit hole, and when I was like really stressed with work and I had all this like mental health stuff, and then I had fatigue, and I was just watching so many dating. So I accidentally became a member of Bachelor Nation. Watched like everything I could get on reruns and like different like streaming sites that I have, and then and like I actually really liked the last season of The Bachelorette with Michelle. The one before with Katie, it was like. There was some gaslighting stuff, and I wrote about that on social media because I've experienced gaslighting, and I have a lot of feelings about the way certain things were portrayed. But Michelle was great. If you're not a Bachelor person, she is just like this phenomenal woman who like totally gets the bullshit of the franchise, and like she's there and she's in it and she's like playing the game, but she's also like she had conversations, I think people in the spiritual community be like, yes, like bring this to the mainstream, like talking about the importance of like living through challenge and like the way your experiences integrate. I don't know. She's a teacher. She's an elementary school teacher. Like I just found her fascinating to watch on a show like this. And then we nosedived. Now, I have no problem specifically with Clayton. I mean, I think Clayton is not good on TV, but like, he's just a dude. Like, so far I haven't seen anything that made me go, oh my god, he's gross. But like, I wasn't going to watch his season because he was just so it was like so clearly like, now we have to return to our generic white guy programming. And like, there's no particular thing about his personality. And it's like, I wasn't going to watch it. And for some reason, my completionist brain needed to watch The Bachelor. And now I'm watching The Bachelor. And I'm probably going to watch the whole thing. But maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I should just let myself cut the cord. But last night I was watching and I was just so... So the more and more you watch it, the more you like can see all the production stuff and how fake everything is. And not fake as in like the people in the show aren't dating. Like they are, but... And they do want to get married. But like the whole premise is clearly messed up, right? And like very few people actually, have a very lasting or meaningful relationship after The Bachelor. Some do. But there's a lot, right? And admittedly, like part of I sort of learned with dating shows, I was like, I don't think of myself as someone who likes drama, but like sometimes it's just entertaining to watch drama, right? And that's okay. But like this, I mean, there's a lot of drama, there's a lot of cattiness. It's a lot of like women pitted against each other kind of cattiness, and I knew to expect that. But like the degree to which the Bachelor's had all these controversy issues around, like the previous host was longtime host said some racist bullshit, and it became this whole like Bachelor Nation learning moment. And they tried to ABC it up and like do the sentimental music and show their commitment through stuff. I mean, having Michelle, who's black, as a bachelorette was part of it, but like in the last episode that I watched, there's this moment. I won't spoil it in case you are watching it, but there's this moment of like a really staged kind of let's all have a conversation about what's hard about our lives, which is pretty common. And then like there's this moment where and again, like, I don't know that the guy actually said anything terrible. I mean, it was very, like, milk toast, lukewarm, whatever. But he said, like, just generally, like, something like, you can talk about race with me, like, it's okay, to somebody, to a black woman, who was saying how, like, she hadn't planned to talk about race at all with him. And I was like, fair. I mean, I don't know why you're on the show. Like, I don't know why necessarily why you're dating the guy, but that's fine. There's all sorts of reasons to be on The Bachelor, so no shade at all to her. But, like, she said that, like, I was not planning on talking about it with you, frankly. And then he comes back and is like, I want you to know that it's okay to talk, to talk to me about race. And then, like, the music swells, and it's like, it's so clearly supposed to be, and they cut, things so that it's like, The Bachelor cares about race. And I'm like, can we not? It's fine. Like, I'm going through this, like, growing acceptance and growing, like, wanting to have conversations and wanting to, like, moving away from my tendency sometimes to, like, just yell at people or be, like, really, not yell at people, but, like, some of the harshness of the ways that I approach things, like, I've realized comes from white culture and punitive dynamics itself. But when it's producers of a show, I'm just like, yeah, we're framing things in a way. So that's The Bachelor. I'm sure we all cared about that. Catching up on some podcasts. At some point I'll do a big podcast episode of, like, Rex and stuff, but one of the ones I've been listening to, I've pulled a lot of the just, like, things that are interesting and fun because, like, I just don't have time. But one of the ones I left was Anita Rao, the Embodied podcast. It's from my home public radio station, WUNC, out of North Carolina, and it's called Embodied, and it's mainly about just, like, topics that are related to, like, bodies, sometimes, like, medical, sometimes, like, sex stuff, sometimes, like, all sorts of things. But the topics are really interesting, and they're things that, like, don't necessarily, you wouldn't expect on, like, just a kind of a journalistic show. And so, yeah, I think it's cool. Like, there was an episode on death doulas, there was an episode on facial feminization surgery, FFS, which is a trans gender affirming surgery. There was an episode on, let's see, death doulas, FFS, what else did I listen to recently? Menopause, just, like, all sorts of things you might be curious about. So that's a good listen. But yeah, I've mostly been reading a lot. So let's get to books. I've been reading a ton because I actually signed up for NetGalley, which is a site where you can, if you're a book reviewer, you can get review copies. And because of my previous experience with, like, personally being contacted by publishers to review things, I assumed this site was going to be like, oh, like 30% of what you request is going to come in. So I asked for a lot of books, and I got all of them. Well, not all, but, like, almost all of them. So I'm like, oh shit, I have this pile of books to review, many of which have already come out or coming out soon. Like, I don't have, how do I, and there's no way to be like, oh my God, I'm sorry, I didn't understand. You can decline to review a book, but I think it affects, like, you look bad on the site and then others won't. And none of this really matters, but I would like to continue, I'd like to do more book reviews. I've been doing them, posting them to my IG, but I will do them here in these monthlies, and then maybe I'll probably do, like, an occasional, like, kind of themed, like, let's get deeper into a few books that resonated with each other, because I've noticed reading this much, there's a lot of cross references. But anyway, I'm just gonna, like, quickly tell you a little bit about the books I read that I finished in January. So, books I finished in January. So on the kind of, like, social justice-y front, there is this very clear, and I'm very excited about it, a movement in these books towards, there's an interesting conversation. I think I'm gonna do a video on this, a conversation between social justice-y books and then, like, more sort of self-helpy books that are more about, like, digital detox or, like, intimacy, famines and belonging and all this COVID stuff, intersecting around just this real need for, like, relationship, and then for healing, and then how do we prioritize that healing, our individual work, our relationship, and also prioritize the collective and understand the urgency of justice. Like, how do we balance the dynamic between justice is really urgent and now, And also making everything urgent burns us out. It means we don't prioritize our healing. It means we keep firefighting, right? And it's like, how do you pivot towards integrating healing and understanding that the healing and the personal work is so fundamental, and that like so many of these things will keep happening if we don't address root causes, but not wanting that to come across as like we don't care about your urgent issue. And there's an extra layer of punitive, like, call out culture, cancel culture dynamics, which I think I don't. It's hard to talk about call out culture and cancel culture, right? Because you don't want to come out. You don't, like, the anxiety around it comes from this punitive dynamic, this white culture, this need for approval. This, I think, like, part of whiteness is, and again, like, whiteness, not white people, but whiteness is this constructed system, and then capitalism is like everything has to be measured and specific and correct, and there is an answer, and it's all data, and like, but reality is shit's messy, and so like it's hard to, because I don't, like, in no way would I want to minimize the pain or like tone police people who are upset and frustrated and angry and calling out because they have been hurt. And also, that tendency, I think, is punitive, and it also stems from this lack of belonging and connection, and this feeling that the only way to do anything is by call-outs because nobody else is listening, right? So it's like a really deep, broad problem. I did do a post on Instagram about cancel and call-out culture that you can see some of my, like, specific opinions about that, and or my thinking about that, and you can engage with me if you'd like, but I noticed that was coming up in some of these books. So one of them is The Wake Up, which is by Michelle Mujung Kim, and which I loved. Kim is a queer Asian, I believe, sorry, I'm trying to remember the specific identity. I'm going to say Asian American. I think that is the identity or one of the identities that Kim uses, but also specifically talks about experiences Korean, and like some of the there's a lot of nuance in that book that I really like, because it's the perspective, one, just like the perspective of a queer Asian person in the United States is like not something you see all the time I mean, there are many people doing social justice work with those identities, and like amazing people that I could rattle off, but doing work and like online and in other spaces that don't have books necessarily, but this particular book, it's cool because it's like you're getting that perspective, but it's not a specific book about the perspective, but what it is that it's a book about social justice, DEI, and like work culture. Kim is brain. Sorry, ADHD. Kim is works in is one of these folks who has a company working with corporate like DEI initiatives and such, and a lot of this like pivoting, this like changing, I've noticed is coming from people who are in that sector, and like I've done a lot of like organizational DEI work as well, and I'm really excited to see this pivot. So it's a book that speaks to organizational DEI, but also just like personal stuff, and specifically what I love is like in the introduction, the way that Kim, by the way, I'm using Kim's last name and not a pronoun because I honestly can't remember. I think it's she, but I don't want to get it wrong. So Kim, the way that in the introduction, Kim specifically is like, this is not a book that's centering whiteness. So it's about a lot of the topics that you might see in one of these sort of like anti-racism for white people, anti-racism for, that sort of assumes that like leaders and organizational people, like it's speaking to white people who don't get it. But that is not what this book does. So this book is on the same themes and could address the same audience, but it's not centering whiteness, and it's centering Kim's own experience, and I really think that comes across in the book. I think it's a beautiful love letter to a lot of these movements and these people who come before it, to Grace Lee Boggs, to, I want to say Prentice Hemphill is quoted a lot, Adrienne Maree Brown, Mia Mingus, other people that my brain is, maybe Angela Davis. I don't know, I've read a couple books and they quote like some of the same people, so I may, like, sometimes I get them mixed up, but there's a real grounding in, like, in these radical movements, and particularly led by racialized people, folks of color, BIPOC, and then the specificity of, like, what does it mean to be, like, Kim's experience immigrating from Korea to the United States, and then, like, finding this, like, being lumped in with like Japanese Americans, for example. And if you know anything about the history of Korea and Japan, like that being a very weird, like, experience of, like, wait, you see us as the same? But then learning, like, how Kim learned about, like, the experience of, like, Japanese Americans who lived here for a long time, and internment and all this stuff. So, like, there's that, there's stories, like, really, personal, like, heart stories, about, things like going to the clinic, not being able to access healthcare as a kid, and, like, what that was like, and also things from the organizational context. And so, there's a lot of, like, exercise reflections, things you can learn, like, would be great for a group context, great for an organizational context, but also gets in a lot of this more, like, radical healing. Let's center marginalized folks. Let's be, like, let's lean into possibility and imagining and bravery, and not just, like, focus on, like, how do we fit into these boxes. So it was a phenomenal read. Like, I'm realizing that I'm doing this, like, even through, except for I've read it, I forget a lot of details. I have memory issues. So check out my review on Instagram. If any of these books, I have reviews on my Instagram. Again, it's @queermagical, so you can actually read the review, or Goodreads, Avery Fawcett, it's the same review. You can see, like, my specific thoughts on each book. I'm gonna try to be shorter. But that was really great. And then I also found it in really excellent conversation with a book called The Four Pivots, which just came out by Sean Gwynwright. I really hope I'm pronouncing that right. We're gonna go with Gwynwright. Gwynwright? Wait, hang on. I'm sorry. I'm gonna look this up. We're doing it live. If you know that reference. So yes, Gwynwright. I think I said Gwynwright. It's Gwynwright. Sean Gwynwright. So another book that would be excellent for organizations, for movement people, but also just for people. The Four Pivots, it's really accessible. The pivots are these themes that Gwynwright uses to explain sort of the ways in which we need to change, and culturally change around movement work, around justice. The subtitle is Reimagining Justice, Reimagining Ourselves. If that sentence appeals to you, or that phrase, reimagining justice, reimagining ourselves, book, check it out. It's very much, like, reflective of my work. When I say in the beginning, like, I help people to find themselves or discover themselves and their roles in an emerging future. That's really what I'm looking at, right? Is, like, you have to, like, uncover yourself and who you are, and your own thing, while reimagining justice. And while, like, finding your role and where you fit and how you work with movements. And this book really speaks to that. The Four Pivots, let's see if I can do them off the top of my head. There's like lens to mirror. So that's all about, like, reflection. I think a lot of these things for spiritual people, for people in healing, will immediately recognize, like, moving from sort of the, like, lens of, like, here's how I'm approaching this, my worldview, the data, and then moving to a more, like, oh, what is this conversation showing me about myself, right? It's real lovers year. Like, that first section is like, oh, it's a lovers year. So there's that. There's, what do we got? Transactional to transformative, so, transforming relationships. There's some other ones. I forget the rest of the pivots, but, like, even if I'm not talking pivot by pivot, that framework makes it really accessible. And then what you're getting is, there are some, like, exercises and things scattered throughout, but it's a real storytelling focus. So it's, like, telling the stories Ginwright has worked in a few different contexts and really pulls from different parts of his own life. So he was a youth organizer and like writes a lot about like organizational and social justice and nonprofit stuff, where if you've been in that sphere, you'll be like, oh God, yes. So he writes about like things like having a job for a summer where, the leader like kept deflecting, and then he basically never got paid for the whole summer, and like getting evicted, and like just the like tremendous pain and anger and like feelings of that. And then being himself in a position as a board member where the same thing basically happened to youth organizers that this organization had hired, where the executive director or CEO like went on vacation, and he kind of assumed, as the board, I think he was board chair at the time, assumed that everything was taken care of, and then found out that like some grants hadn't been written, and so the funding wasn't come through, and like what was like for him to like stand on a stage and address these youth that he knew he was about to do the same thing to them, and like had to tell them that he didn't know if their paychecks were coming through, which I think they ultimately did, if I remember the conclusion of the story. They got the funding, but it was so interesting because that story sticks out to me because he talked about like the layers of starting from a place of I don't want to screw these people over, and also I'm scared and I'm anxious and I don't want to do this. Like, this is going to be a hard conversation. And so he talked about like what he didn't do, which was he didn't lie for very long. I mean, I don't know if you would call it lying, but like I think he said like, we're figuring it out, and then was like, we can't just keep saying that, right? So he didn't do what the person had done to him. He stood up, he was honest, he said, hey kids, here's the deal. Like, I understand. Like, we're trying to get payment for you, but we don't have it yet. I mean, I understand if you have to leave and get another job. But he described, the way he described that, it was like that was one layer. And then he talks about how he was challenged by the students, and how the students kind of come back and ask him questions like, okay, what is your role in this? What is your accountability? Like, what? And he kind of like, the way he described it was he kind of fumbled it. He kept kind of repeating the party line. Like, I don't know. I told you the thing, I'm not, And it really is like an insight into this personal, like the way that there are layers, the way that you can like think, okay, I'm doing the good thing, and then be frustrated and be like, oh, well, shit, I thought I was doing the good thing, and now you want me to go deeper. But like the importance of that going deeper in that transformation, and like the way he looks back on it now was really interesting to me. I also just like hearing from somebody who's been a funder, so he's worked, I think, in funding organizations, if I remember correctly, but been a board member, been on staff of nonprofits. Like, there's often this lack of, there's a lot of like CYA, there's a lot of like cover your ass, a lot of cute language to paper over institutional and leadership issues, and lack of accountability and all this stuff, and like lack of just humanness, and so having somebody speak in that vulnerable way, not, by the way, not to censure it, like understanding that those kids like had that experience, but like just hearing those reflections is rare. And so I really appreciated that. And he also talks about, like things from stories as a parent, just being a black man in America. There was some like little examples that will stick with you. Like one where his wife and daughter like got into a lift and had like the immediate assumption was that the driver was being racist, and like it turned out he because he wasn't responding, and it turned out he was deaf, like just a lot of like examples that help you think about the ways in which the assumptions we make, the ways in which our worldview applies, like while totally valid and grounded in pain, also like how can we shift that? And it's really eye-opening. Like I found myself applying the concepts already. So the 4 pivots, I can't do short book reviews apparently. Okay, and then one more in the like social justice category, and then I'll quickly do a couple more and then we'll be done. One more in the social justice category that just finished is Abolition, Feminism Now. And there's a period after each in the title. Abolition, Feminism Now. And let me just check the editor's names on this. So this is a collaborative project that is really cool. You may have heard some of the buzz about it. And it is the authors, sorry, I know their organizations really well, but I'm like blanking on their names. The authors came together. Well, I mean, I know Angela Davis, but I know there's others. So Angela Davis, Gina Dent, Erica Miners and Beth Ritchie are the folks who are credited on this. So it's a collaboration between Critical Resistance and my brain wants to say Song, but that's not right. It's not Song. It's Critical Resistance and Insight. And if you know these organizations, which I do, I've been really, especially Insight, I've been really, really transformed, and like so much of my justice thinking comes from Insight. I encountered some of their work in the early 2000s, mid 2000s, and they've been doing this for a while. In fact, this is the, I believe, 20th anniversary of an Insight Critical Resistance statement that I've referenced a lot in my own work around abolition, and they, Insight put out, so I read a few of their books, but particularly I always recommend, if you have any question, anything around, so two different topics. One is the nonprofit industrial complex. So this really helped me see like what's going on with nonprofits. When I first started working in them, is called The Revolution Will Not Be Funded. And so it talks about funding and nonprofits and just some of like that model and where does that fit into justice. And then the other one that I always recommend for people who are struggling with the challenges of like abuse and intimate partner violence, but then the added risk of involving the police, involving the criminal justice system, like knowing that both these things are abusive. The challenges of like, what if you're in an abusive dynamic with somebody who's doing great organizing work and you're in the same movement, and like what is it going to mean if that ends? Restorative justice, you know, etc. It's called, oh my god, it's The Revolution Starts, oh, literally, it just came out of my mouth. I was like, it's this, no, it's that. The Revolution Starts at Home is that book. And so those two I really, really, really recommend. But Insight and Critical Resistance have worked together on a lot of things. And this book is basically, so there's 3 sections, abolition, feminism, now. The introduction is some of the best part of the book, though, I think, because they really engage with, they talk about like critical genealogy, I think is one phrase they use. They talk about this book as like, they want to document and show some of the unsung heroes, some of the organizations. It's really like a non-linear and anti-capitalist way of doing history, where they're not measuring like organizations by whether they're still around or whether they got a legislative victory. They're really destabilizing, deconstructing that, and opening up a door for folks to see all of the grassroots efforts, the small local, you know, like the little, like all the ways in which it's not just one big organization with one big name. It's like all of these movements and dynamics, and how do they intersect, and how does thinking on different issues really intersect. And of course they're talking about abolition and feminism, but there's other movements that come into this. So they tell a lot of stories. I found a lot of, you know, resonance because I was really around in like feminist movements and like really grappling with like, what does it mean? I sort of moved away from feminist because I had tried to be like, no, like feminism is include, like all the folks who've feel left out of feminism, like you should be in the tent and the people who are leaving you out should be questioning their choices, right? Like it shouldn't be that feminism is reduced to this like one, like white feminism, TM. Unfortunately, that kept happening, and eventually I stopped using that word as much, although I would consider myself a feminist. It was a long sentence to have to, in order to say, like, to be clear, I am a, you know, trans-inclusive, because I used to say radical feminist, and then that got co-opted, so it's like I'm a trans-inclusive, global, pro-sex work, abolitionist, you know, anti-racist, like all the words, feminist, when I believe all those things are feminism. This book really spoke to that. It also brings in, you know, historical stuff. Like I think having Angela Davis on the team is like a big thing to get some of the like histories of things like the House of D in New York, the prison, women's prison that was right in Manhattan, in the Village, I think. And the ways in which, you know, like literally inmates shouting through the windows, like the kinds of organizing that was happening. They talk about different movements and the way that, like the issues with both carceral feminism
like feminism that like things like anti-trafficking movements that have, or victims' rights movements, or if you remember in the 90s, a lot of this like law and order stuff was like, this is feminism, but it's like this like protecting, like we're like protecting women and children by like throwing people in jail and like all the problems of that. And then also addresses like the ways in which abolitionist movements have not always like, or right now might not be fully understanding like the role of women and femmes, and particularly Black and Latina women and femmes, and queer and trans, like all how much, like how foundational those things are. But the reason I like the introduction so much is it really like it lays this out, and it's very humble. It's like, you know, we're doing this, we want to like present this in like a non-linear fashion, and we want folks to see these stories, and we want to see things that quote unquote fail, because that's not a thing. And the way they all contribute to the movement, and the way we're telling the same stories and we're hashing out the same things. And so we want to put this in a book, because it's like we need to know this history, we need to understand, so the next time somebody brings up the same old tired argument in a different coat, we can respond to it. And they talk about things in the book like organizational struggles and ways in which members of their own organizations have been called out, and there have been problems, and the ways in which, you know, like, yeah, like bad shit happens in these movements, but the way the movement keeps persisting, and people burn out, but the movement continues, and they sort of like decenter themselves in the way that they present it, and basically say like, this isn't a authoritative final account, like this is now, this is happening, this is living, and like critical genealogy, this is like tracing our roots and then like continuing to remain critical. And then in the third chapter, because there's like Abolition, Feminism, Now, each one's a chapter. In the third chapter, the Now chapter, they do a case study on Chicago that really helps to see like how over time all these different organizations, many of which aren't around, and all these different movements, many of which have evolved or died out or changed, and these leaders, some of whom are burnt out, some of whom aren't with us anymore, but like how they all are involved in some of the changes happening. Yeah, super recommend. I recommend all three of those books, but super recommend. Okay, I actually will be shorter now. And then like I'll just like a little quickly just say other books I've read. Okay, cannot recommend enough Body Astrology. If you have any interest in medical astrology, or you just want to like embodied self-care kind of astrology, Claire Gallagher, Body Astrology, comes out in a few days, I think. I'm pretty sure it drops on the 8th. Blown away, check out my review, it's really good, and it's really accessible. Like generally medical astrology isn't, like typically when you look up medical astrology, it's like real dense, real like ancient text kind of, you know, people distill it, but I find that some of the authors, no offense to the authors, can also be kind of dense not dense like, dense like in the writing, like very, like you feel like you have to have a degree sometimes, or just esoteric. So if you're not really drawn to the esoteric, but you are drawn to like, what does embodied astrology look like? And I call the astrology I practice embodied intuitive natal astrology. What are the principles I can work with to understand my own cycles and energy? So if you've been here for this whole, good God, 2 hours. What? 2 hours. Sorry, next time will be shorter. I mean, if for some reason you've been here this whole time, or have watched in bits, then this cycles back to what I was talking about with my own cycles, and this book kind of pushed me towards this. It's really accessible. You can jump right in with like, how do you do food and exercise with the moon phases, and then get into all the details. But Claire is, sorry, I don't know why I call her first name, Gallagher, is very, like it feels, the way Gallagher works with this feels very like rooted in like health at every size, body positivity, fat acceptance, like all these movements. It is not shamey, it is not judging. And in fact, a lot of the astrology she talks, I think she talks about is like, how do you use these planets and concepts to work with your stories and your judgments and your shame and your cultural messages around food and exercise, and like, how do you, and like, you know, it's not ever like, this planet says you should restrict your eating, you know, like it's just good, read it. Okay, this is a list of all the books you have to read. No, I'm so sorry, because a lot of the books I read this month are good. And then Root and Ritual, Becca P. Australia. I'm sure a lot of people have heard Becca's podcast. I hadn't really. I think it's called Belonging. Is that the right one? Anyway, I hadn't, but I've heard one episode. And Root and Ritual is, again, really accessible. If you're looking for something that's like kind of kitchen witchy, like nature based or earthy, but like maybe you're not quite fully into spells or like witchcraft, you don't identify as a witch, but you kind of like are in that middle place like I am, and you just want like more connection to like nature and people. And again, we're coming back to that relational piece, that earth-based piece. Really like grounded exercises, ideas. It is, a lot of the stories, they're coming from the perspective of a white European and so person. And so while there is acknowledgement of that and like mentions of how you could adjust things, and a woman, cis woman, mentions how you could shift things, there aren't necessarily specific examples that often that are provided for others, and there's a lot of storytelling from P. Australia's personal experience, and so you may find that like some of that isn't resonant. I did find as a white European person that some of how P. Australia writes about ancestry like was meaningful to me and helpful to me, but I do want to name that. Like as a trans person, I found that some of the stuff about like cycles and was like it was like, you could adapt this, and I was like, yeah, give an example, like get a trans friend to tell you an example, right? Because I can give you plenty of examples. So there's that book. And then finally, Breaking Ground is a book that I would not have normally read, but I've been kind of opening myself up to Christian thinking and philosophers, because I'm interested in all sorts of spiritual traditions and philosophies and theologies. So, but I hadn't actually like read anything. I just had this thought, I should list, like I should be more open to Christianity, and I didn't grow up Christian. I don't have a real tie to it, but Breaking Ground is an anthology written from summer to summer, 2020 to 2021, and it's responding to things like COVID and uprising and all that, but it's like a real range of thinkers, and engages a lot with like politics and like what is the role of, if any, of religion and like morality and politics. And I didn't agree, like a lot of the authors I would like agree, and then their conclusion was like, so Christianity needs to be like more infused, and I was like, no, I think it's just that like meaning and spirituality need to be more infused in daily life. But it was a good book. It was an interesting book, and it was a wide range of contributors, and it'll definitely get you thinking. So, okay, wow, it's a 2-hour video, friends. Hope you enjoyed it. If you watched it, probably nobody is here. If you literally watch this entire video, tell me in the comments. I'm sure it's nobody, but tell me in the comments, because I will give you a cookie, virtual cookie, vegan virtual cookie. But if you are still here, just a reminder that you can sign up for my newsletter below, and I would love for you to sign up for Hearts and or Swords, because it's gonna be a cool experience. Okay, I should eat something. Hope everyone had a January. I don't know how to say a good January, just a January. You're here, you're surviving, you're thriving. Take a deep breath, drink some water, eat some food, and we'll do another of these next month, and we'll see you, if everything goes according to plan, I'll see you tomorrow for an episode of Tarot Study. Okay.